G'day legends and happy new year. I hope so far it has been fantastic and I hope that you are really well. Now, after 2 weeks off for my arm, I'm back into making videos. Now, I see an orthopedic surgeon on Monday and then on Tuesday I get a scan on my brain. So there may also be some gaps in this as well, depending on how hectic some of those days are with the length that some of these appointments can actually push out. But I'll have more information on the severity of my arm on Monday, and that will, have an effect on these further trips into the future. Now, I know that I have missed a lot in the past couple of weeks, and I do apologize for that. So we may talk a little bit about that, and we'll talk about some of the news through the day. So we're going to go over the maps. We're going to go, of course, over Gonzalo Lira. We're going to look at air support, and then new budgets, new packages given into Ukraine from the UK. But I think one of the biggest stories of the day, and only being reported by some media and not others, is that an American, a reporter living in Ukraine, Gonzalo Lira, who was detained by the Ukrainian authorities and then was trying to flee the country and was detained again, has reportedly today died in a Ukrainian prison. Now, I saw this first released then by the Post from Tucker Carlson. So let's have a look over this now. You do have to excuse me because I am still hopeless on my mouse. So, not wrong one. Here we go. So Gonzalo Lira Sr. says his son has died at 55 in a Ukrainian prison where he was being held for a crime criticizing the Zelensky and Biden governments. Gonzalo Lira was an American citizen, but the Biden administration clearly supported his imprisonment and torture. Several weeks ago, we spoke to his father, who predicted his son would be killed. Now, one thing I do want to point out in this is none of this yet has been officially confirmed by the US or Ukrainian governments, at least that I can see, casting some shadow, some doubt onto this. But at the moment, it does seem to be true, being that some big media has also picked it up. But wait on the 100% confirmation. We'll see from there. But one thing I want to say is no matter what you think of Gonzalo, regardless of what you think of him being a hero or a villain, reporters should be not dying in prison, regardless of their stance. Now, of course, there's a full background on Gonzalo, and people will say he was a sex tourist going to Ukraine, started like this. Well, I can tell you that some of maybe your favorite creators on YouTube, maybe someone who's bald, was, or people will say was a sex tourist into areas like this. There's a hell of a big business for that before the war in Ukraine and continuing on. And we've seen many people criticized of exactly that. Now, I'm not saying then that is a good thing, but I'm saying it doesn't make him an outlier from a hell of a lot of older Westerners going to Ukraine. Does it then deserve being killed or dying in prison? No, it doesn't. Now, if Gonzalo is alive, it is absolutely in Ukraine's best interest to provide the proof of life as soon as possible. And if he is dead, they need to have what has actually happened, release the medical reports from there, although it may not clear up many people's suspicion of what happened. And freedom of speech and freedom of press can sometimes put troops and missions in danger. And this is a really hard thing of working in this sphere, and there's a constant fight in war now, because media can be spread so quickly. You can live stream things, post on the internet within seconds, or live whatever, and of course that increases the danger to the troops on the front line and how much information can be spread. Back in the day, if someone took a photo, it had to be developed, written about, and it's in the paper bloody a week later. And these OPSEC leaks we've seen multiple times have ended in tragedy of targeting of troops from photos, videos, posts, all of this. And when is it that someone is a reporter, a journalist, and when does that switch into an informant or a spy? It doesn't only mean you're working specifically for someone, it doesn't mean that. But if the information you're releasing can be used for assessment like this, where actually is that line? And I think in modern media, that line, no one really knows where it is, especially when does you get a photo post troop locations and positions or a photo of troops. It's very, very murky in actually what that is. Now, we have also seen that Ukraine has assassinated people it thought were informants for Russia, both in Ukraine and in Russia. And I think one of the most famous ones was this Denis Kuriev, who I've spoken about before. We just have a look that he was thrown from a van in central Kyiv with a gunshot to the head. He'd returned from Belarus, where he'd been assisting peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, and was suspected of treason, suspected of being a double agent, although it's somewhat been cleared up more that he was actually working in the interests of Ukraine. So I'm not saying that Ukraine assassinated Gonzalo Lira. I'm not saying that Gonzalo Lira was a good guy, as far as some of the things he's accused of or whatever. But absolutely, there is a responsibility that someone who's in your prison system needs to be protected, and freedom of speech, freedom of media for an allied country still needs to uphold that. So let's have a look over some of these other bits and pieces. This was Gonzalo Lira's last posts on Twitter, X. Right now, I'm about to try and get out of Ukraine and seek political asylum in Hungary. Now, if you go onto his YouTube channel, you can watch these, I think there's 3 videos, and he's updating exactly as this happens. I'll either cross the border and make it safely, or I'll be disappeared by the Kiev regime. This is what happened to me over the past 3 months, and he'll explain it fully in this. We won't go over it, but you can go and find this. And the US State Department would rather return me to, and I'm not as referring to some of the people who've got back as well. I'm hoping the Hungarians will read my indictment and say this is BS, and we're not sending him back. So leaning on that as well. So let's then have a look at the final letter, and this is getting around as the letter that he has sent to his family, although confirmation on this I don't 100% have. Tell my sister I have double pneumonia, both lungs, as well as an pneumothorax and a very severe case of edema, swelling of the body. All this started in late October, but was ignored by the prison. They only admitted I had pneumonia on December 22. I am about to have a procedure to reduce the edema pressure in my lungs, which is causing the extreme shortness of breath to the point of passing out after minimal activity, or even just talking for 2 minutes. So that is apparently his last letter that was then sent out. Now, this was posted by Yahoo at the time, talking about when Gonzalo was then arrested at the border. Ukraine law enforcement actions were carried out in accordance with the laws, the SBU, in a comment to NV regarding Elon Musk. So Elon Musk posted about this a few months back, going, there's an American citizen being detained here. Of course, Elon Musk is a huge one for freedom of speech. Lira, who holds dual citizenship of Chile and the US, was arrested in Kharkiv Oblast for promoting Russian aggression. Investigation found that Lira's videos denied Russian war crimes and justified Russian aggression. Lira claimed that Ukraine was shelling its own territory and a neo-Nazi regime ruled the country. Now, such activities constitute a criminal offence under Article 436-2 of the Criminal Code of Ukraine, that is justification and recognition as lawful denial of Russian armed aggression against Ukraine and glorification of its participants. The SBU documented Lira's activities and served the blogger with a notice of suspicion. Now, of course, this then all leads into him being held in the detention centre, and then him trying to leave and then being held again. So it is very, very interesting exactly what happened. And this you can see breakdown on his videos. They initially released on house arrest after posting the bail. He was arrested again in July when he attempted to cross the border into Hungary on his motorcycle. And yet we haven't seen anything officially from the US. And I think that's what a lot of people are waiting for. Now, those jumping up and down saying, well, Russia uphold these freedoms, that's what they're fighting for, have obviously not looked very closely at some of the politicians and journalists who have criticised Russia and the fate that had them behold them. But there needs to be, I think, very soon a what happened and questions answered by Kyiv of what has happened, seemingly of how big this news is, maybe not in the mainstream media, but on platforms like X, on Telegram, how massive this is. I think there needs to be questions asked. And regardless of the crimes committed, states have the responsibility of the health and safety of its prisoners. And there should also be a lot of criticism given into Russia and the health and safety of those that it detains as well. So it's a really hard case, exactly what has happened here. Of course, there's a lot of people that will deny what he has said. There's people that will back it up. And with propaganda, there are things that may have an element of truth and an element of being false. But things like this, it is a bit scary. And we have seen a spokesman for Ukraine say that they will hunt down propagandists. I know they took that back, but it was still said on an official channel by an employee, and then you see something like this happen. Now, I don't agree with the majority of what Gonzalo has said. And there is some that I think is, if my country was at war, that I would think that guy needs to shut up about doing this. And people say, reap what you sow. You're posting these locations, putting these people in danger, but this has happened back. But the amount of propaganda this has then fueled against Ukraine from here is why I'm saying Ukraine need to come out with what actually happened here. And I think the US being silent on this isn't a good look either. And of course, the right will run with this. Now, we have seen as well that Ukraine has requested more air support aircraft, like close air support aircraft. And you and I have spoken about this in length, as particularly with attack helicopters, your Apaches, say, or a lot of countries getting rid of Tiger helicopters, would that have a big effect on the front line? As we've seen the Kar-50 helicopters, the Russian attack helicopters, they were very successful in certain areas of the front line against armour to supply that close air support for the troops. Now, let's have a look at this exclusive from Reuters. Ukraine's ground forces commander said on Friday that Kiev needed more military aircraft for its efforts, such as A-10, the Warthog attack jets to support infantry, and planes that could fire long-range cruise missiles. So I spoke to Reuters in exclusives. I will talk about A-10s as an option if they'll be given to us. This is not a new machine, but a reliable one that has proven itself in many wars and which has a wide array of weapons for destroying land targets to help the infantry. Now, in this as well, the A-10 is America's answer or version of an aircraft that Russia and Ukraine use extensively, being the Su-25. The Su-25 is a very similar aircraft as far as it's armoured, it's slow comparatively, it's a close air support, and the Su-25s have been used a lot. But in this as well, A-10, slow, older aircraft will be very highly susceptible to the high technology air defense that we see both Ukraine and Russia operate. And in this case, the Su-25 has been very susceptible to everything from man pads to truck-wheeled air defense from both sides. And then in this, the A-10 will be really, really susceptible to that as well. Of course, flying low, you can get around it, but still, it's not going to have the same effect because you're being way closer in. If you're using the main gun on this, you're coming down on top. Look at some videos from Afghanistan of those being used, rather than how the F-16s could have been used, firing many missiles over tens or hundreds of kilometers. You're very far back. And an A-10 on the front line in a close air support role would be a very, very dangerous mission there, like we've seen with the Su-25s, like we've seen with the other attack helicopters. The A-10 Thunderbolt. Have you seen that video, that meme where it's like, that's a Hogwarts? Love that meme. Don't worry. If you haven't seen it, just let me go. Has been in service since the 70s. It's older aircraft. F-16s are older aircraft too. One thing in this, though, is yes, we're seeing fighter jets going into Ukraine. People will speculate that they're already there, but these are from not the US. These are from other states. So even though Ukraine has already had the success of getting fighter aircraft in, not from the US, and this would have to come from the US as far as the A-10. He said that the A-10 would provide crucial support for ground forces in their attempt to seize the initiative against a well-resourced enemy. It is for destroying land-based targets, tanks, artillery, everything that counters the infantry, which is true. Out of the attack helicopters such as the 64, the Apache, and the Cobra, as well as the UH-60 Black Hawk, could also play an important role. Said, frontline helicopters are operating much further back, pulling up, sending out unguided rockets because of the danger to them on the front line. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began on Feb 22, Kiev has pressed Western allies to supply increasingly sophisticated arms and munitions, including armoured vehicles, tanks, long range. We spoke before the counteroffensive, when Ukraine first floated the idea of F-16s, that would something like Apaches actually be a better option for the support of the armoured troop movement at the front. Fighter jets can do that close air support role, but not to the degree a helicopter can, because they can just hover there, or a slower aircraft with the gun, say that the A-10 has. We actually floated all of this before that, and we spoke about that the A-10 older, less sophisticated aircraft, probably easier to get across the line and push that to actually get it in. So it is interesting to see this now being spoken about. And you need to look at the successes your adversaries had. And yes, a lot of Kf-22 choppers have been shot down by Russian choppers have been shot down, but they've also had a lot of success on the front line with those as well. And you go, well, should we have something working similarly to this? Now, if you look at the main thing trending all over the media today is that the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has unveiled a new military funding package worth £2.5 billion, around $4.7 billion for Ukraine, after he's travelled to Kiev in the past couple of days. Now, in the announcement, he has said, "We will stand with Ukraine in their darkest hours and in better times to come." Now, one thing in this, we still don't have any word from the American Senate about more money going into Ukraine. Last time we spoke, this was still being held up and they have gone onto their Christmas leave. Now, in this almost $5 billion, it includes the largest single drone package of this war so far, up to a few $100 billion. As we've seen, this drone warfare has absolutely ramped up throughout this war. Now, Sunak and Zelensky have signed a bilateral security agreement for the next 10 years. And Zelensky has said that this will remain in effect until Ukraine acquires its NATO membership. Now, the details exactly of what this agreement are will be released later. We know there have been security agreements before, including Russia, the US, the UK, and we're not exactly sure how this is going to look. People are saying this security agreement will then have UK soldiers on the ground. That won't happen, but it will be interesting to see exactly what this agreement actually is. Now, of course, what we're going to do is we're going to go then over the maps. We're going to have a look on the deep state. We're going to look at Syriac, and we're going to look, of course, at some recaps of exactly what has happened. So let me find where my mouse is. Try and use your mouse wrong-handed for a day. It absolutely sucks. And the problem with my arm at the moment is turning like this is agony. I'm just going to ask the ortho, is it all right to bring up onto my desk like that? Anyway, let's have a look at Syriac, talking about the year of 2023. And I hope you had a great year. But the year 23 is about to come to an end. And what better than to make a small summary analysis of what happened and what has happened to us during the year. In Ukraine, a new year began with the partial breakthrough at Soledar, where Russian forces and Wagner's mercenaries managed to take the city and expand their control further north to Bakhmut, where they threatened to cut off the last supply route for Ukrainian troops. However, the battle was settled in a bitter urban warfare in which both sides suffered heavy losses, especially the Ukrainian side, which continued to send in reinforcements to stop the Russian advance, but in vain as the city fell under its control. With Bakhmut taken, the Russian army adopted a defensive posture, as they were aware that the Ukrainian army had been preparing an offensive in the south to reach the Sea of Azov for months. So, of course, the counteroffensive to push down through Tokmak down to the Sea of Azov and cut off this east and west of the country. In response, a large defensive line was built along the front in the months leading up to the offensive, the Surovikin line, as the Russian command was aware of the risk of the collapse of its forces on this front, similar to what happened in Kharkov or Kherson. We saw Russia at the end of 22 have that massive Ukraine be able to push through and sweep through areas. The Ukrainian summer offensive began in June. And during the first month, the Ukrainian forces made significant gains, including the elimination of the Russian salient at Velika Novosilka. It was therefore expected that Ukrainian troops would soon reach the Surovikin line from several fronts, causing the collapse of the Russian defences and allowing them to take the cities of Tokmak and Melitopol. So let's look at where we're speaking about so far. So we're talking, oh my God, in here. So coming down on several fronts, get to Tokmak, get to Melitopol, and this, of course, Sea of Azov, and cut off this supply that Russia can have into the Kherson Oblast through here, through Zaporizhia. Oh my God. Okay, let me try and do this. I apologize. Anyway, however, during the second month of the offensive, it became clearer that these objectives were difficult to achieve. The pace of the advance had slowed down, and the Ukrainian troops, although they were on the verge of reaching the defence line, were carrying with them a great deal of wear and tear. At the beginning of August, the Ukrainian army reached the Surovikin line, but the offensive capacity had been reduced and there was already talk of a stalemate on the front, which was confirmed in September when the Ukrainian offensive had officially failed. It was then, in autumn, that the Russian army readopted an offensive and focused on the new city of Avdiivka, which was well fortified, but which, like Bakhmut, would further deplete the Ukrainian troops, who began to send troops from the south to the east. And we're still seeing this fight going on heavily in Avdiivka today. Initial Russian assaults resulted in heavy losses, but advances were quickly made along the railway line and the southern industrial zone and the north of Donetsk airport. We'll show you this. But the Battle of Bakhmut will be an important episode in this conflict during 2024. Meanwhile, the Battle of Mariinka was coming to an end, with both sides fighting for this border town from the beginning of the conflict. Inch by inch, the Russians advanced with difficulty due to stubborn Ukrainian resistance and under ruins. With Mariinka taken, Russian troops will have an open road to advance on the southwest in Donetsk and take Ugledar. This location along Sinkivka in the north, and two most important Russian failures, leading to multiple losses and few gains. Kharkov and Luhansk have been the fronts where the least changes have been seen, but no less intense. The war attrition continues, and the Ukrainian army manages to maintain its positions in the face of numerous Russian offensive actions to reach the Oskil River and force the Ukrainian withdrawal from the eastern bank. So, of course, talking up in the northeast, we've seen the least amount of change, and of course talking Mariinka, which sits down in here, and of course Ugledar, to get an idea of exactly where we are talking about on these maps. Now, let's see, we'll bring up over the past month, November and December saw a new trend as Ukrainian attrition began to show, allowing Russian troops to counter-attack on several fronts and recover lost territory on the Zaporozhye front. Of the 327 square kilometres won by Ukraine in the summer offensive, 38 have already been recovered by Russian forces. The same happened in Donetsk, specifically north and south of Bakhmut, where the Ukrainian army managed to take much of what the Wagner forces had won in the spring. All indications are that Russian army wants to move the front beyond Bakhmut to the town of Chasiv Yar, possibly another major battle in 2024. And I'll show you on the map right now exactly how that is looking, and it is looking like that is what Russia planned to do. So, of course, this is Bakhmut, this is Chasiv Yar. Now, let's step back a few days. Now, it might take a second to load. Let's go back to the start of the year, and we can see that around Klishkivka, all around Russia, are extending their control outside of Bakhmut and recapturing areas that Ukraine pushed in on their spring, summer, into winter, then offensive. So you can see this push around Kromove and Klishkivka. And there hasn't been too much movement over the past week, but have extended control around mainly Klishkivka, Kromove, and this push right out from Klishkivka in here, and this push out from the dashes in near Advanovsky here as well, pushing, as he says, onto Chasiv Yar. Now, making an overall balance of gains, the Russian army currently controls 84,000 square kilometres after the invasion of 22, which is 13.92% of Ukraine. During 23, the Russian army took control of 504 square kilometres, mostly seen on the eastern front. On the other hand, Ukraine army managed to take 336 square kilometres, mostly on the southern front. So you can see where successes are changing. These figures reflect the impossibility of making major advances in areas that are increasingly fortified, making gains at the cost of major losses. Any gains made in this war by either side come at the expense of massive human losses and big vehicle losses as well. This trend is set to continue in 24, even with an increasingly weak Ukrainian army dependent on international aid against a Russia that has managed to resolve many of the initial problems that led to well-known setbacks. Sadly, this war is far from over, and this war is far from over. Now, we do see more equipment going into Ukraine, like we spoke about with the UK, and Russia is somewhat getting on top of some setbacks, but also the longer this goes on, the more that the sanctions will start to hit Russia as well. But of course, they've not hit anywhere to the degree people would think or like them to happen. But we've also seen Russia using things like North Korean missiles. They've said they're using, well, Ukraine has said that they are using, and of course, Iranian drones, helping to fix some of its issues. And we can just see here over December that Russia actually had made more ground here. And if you actually look over the year, that, basically no change. If you actually look in the extent of a year, the amount Russia made, the amount that Ukraine made. But if you were to add that up, there's been no real change at all over the course of 23, but at the expense of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Russian and Ukrainian lives to have this. And the fighting has been ongoing, and incredibly harsh in those areas. Now, that is, I guess, the slow part done. So, of course, we're going to have a look then on the maps and how there are some changes. Now, the first place I want to come is down then into Terney. So, I'm Terney, Krinky, coming down here. Now, this is where Ukraine have the bridgehead across to the left bank of Dnipro, and this is a very, very important area. Now, we haven't seen any real change on here. We've seen Russia really desperately trying to get this back, having huge losses, but it is an incredibly important area for Ukraine to maintain some control on the left bank of the Dnipro River. Now, is this enough? Is there enough equipment here to launch a full-scale attack? No. The amount you're going to have to cross across to actually do that is huge, but they still need some control across here. Now, let's see what the UK MOD then says about this. Ukrainian forces operating on the east bank of the Dnipro River, left bank, same as, have been using FPV drones fitted with munitions to target Russian forces. So we know that kamikaze drones. The FPV drones are being used in conjunction with artillery to target Russian forces' vehicles, with a military blogger estimating 90% of Russian military equipment on Krinky Senka has been destroyed. This is the only place that I've seen that figure, and there's a hell of a lot of equipment around there. But yeah, Russia's inability to counter FPV drones is likely due to a shortage of Russian EW capability in the area. We know both sides use a shitload of EW. How effective is this EW against some of these simple analog style FPV drones? Not as effective as some people would like to think. So we have seen as well a lot of EW equipment from Russia being targeted, and both Ukraine and Russia operate a lot of EW in there. How effective against drones is it? Well, you look at the evidence of how many sides are getting hit by these. If it was 100% effective, we wouldn't see these drones causing absolute havoc on the front line. And listen to any of the soldiers that I speak to, they will all say the thing that they are most scared of on the front are the drones. And my thing would be, if I was a soldier here, I'd be most scared of drones killing me, and then second most scared of them becoming a meme to fucking dubstep music of me trying to get away from the bloody drone. Everyone saw me with the drone in Israel. Now, we're just going to go up and down the map a little bit. We're going to talk then to the south of Kyiv, of course, Robotny here, and we have seen that Russia has made a little bit of ground near Verbove, and let's talk then about this right here. This is Syriac. Syrian Zap front. Russian army made a small advance west of Verbove, and we like to see that both these maps line up specifically with that. Now, some maps are reporting that Ukraine has made a fair bit of ground back into Robotny here. Now, haven't seen that reflected on the Ukrainian deep state map or Syriac maps here. We do see a small change in some of the control here, but nothing really major over the past week. And you can just see where that green shifts into grey zone is just more control over grey zone. So we're not 100% sure what is happening in here, but over the past 24 hours, I am seeing that Ukraine could have made back a fair bit of ground in here. Now, come up to where Ukraine launched its first major offensive. Now, if you remember this word, this Avlika Novosilivka, this is where we're speaking about where the counteroffensive really began pushing down through Blahatny, Makarivka, Urozani through here. Now, we have seen this is where it sort of stalled out right here, and they were hoping to continue pushing all the way back down. That Ukraine has extended some of its control just to the west of Urozani. So let's go forward in here and have a look, and you'll see the actual front doesn't change too much, but where is controlled or not has changed. But by this not being blue, I think that this is just a map update. Otherwise, it would be blue. Green means that it's over 2 weeks. Now, no change in Ugledar. Let's then move up then to Novomakalivka. Now, this is where we see a major change right here. So let's step back first, and then we will see what is happening here. So we're in reverse, remember this. So from the 31st into 2024, Happy New Year, Novomakalivka, we will then see a major pushback. Russia lose a lot of ground there, and Russia extend their control out to the north of Solodki, just to the northeast of Solodki here. So there has been major changes there, and I had a little bit of look into what exactly has happened here. Now, let's talk about this. This is what Syriac has said. Situation in southwest Donetsk. Ukrainian army retreated from some positions northeast of Novomakalivka. Russian army intensified attacks on this axis. The Russian, following the failure of Russian troops to capture the town from the south, they are trying to advance from the north. So the south, of course, the bottom of it, to increase the pressure on 3 sides in order to force Ukrainian troops eventually eastwards of Parasovkia. The capture of this road means priorities are then Ugledar. So we know that Ugledar is at more threat from Novomalivka and Mariinka coming under the control. Now, what he's basically saying in this push is that Russia is pulling back from its failed assaults from the south and is going to try from the north here. Now, you and I spoke about this then on the 3D map. Oh, shit, I'll do this. So we spoke about how hard the break-in is going to be by Russia to actually get into Novomalivka. Now, we have seen that Russia has pushed right up into some of these areas before and now have had this major push back here. And we spoke about the break-in into Novomalivka will be very, very difficult for Russia. It's all well and good to advance across some of this open ground, but once you enter here, that it's going to be very difficult. Now, there is some small hills in here, nothing really to speak of, but once you get into that urban fighting, the break-in is the hardest part. Now, I've had a look on this map, and I can't see any real benefit of coming in from the north side, but I think that the southern attacks have been repulsed by Ukraine. Ukraine has pushed them back, therefore they might try then on the northern side. And we've seen that in Ugledar, trying axis after axis because of failed attacks, failed assaults in there. So if you think it's frustrating you, it's frustrating me more. Now, we're going to come up into Mariinka and look at what changes we have seen. Now, Mariinka has come under complete control by the Russian forces. Of course, this is ground from 2014, and this is the advancement over here. And every inch of this has been fought for absolutely tooth and nail. But over the past couple of weeks, we have seen Russia exert a lot more control over the demolished, destroyed town of Mariinka. So push forward and have extended out to the north and the west here, coming under full control there. Now, I haven't actually seen if there's an official release by Ukraine saying that has become occupied there, but I may have missed it in the past few weeks, but have extended control here. Now, this is what Surak will say. Situated in western the city, Russian army made small advances northwest of Mariinka in this little bit right there that we're seeing. So lines up across both maps. That makes me happy. Now, we're going to come then into Avdiivka. Now, I don't have an update from Surak on this, so we're just going to then go through the map and have a look at where the control is being shifted. So let's walk forward slowly and we will talk about it. So we're seeing more control over, this is where the railway is. This is where, when we spoke about the yearly month update, where Russia really was trying to get was more control over the railway to the north west of Avdiivka. And they also make more ground out to the west of Pisky, and as well closing this sort of pincer from near Vasily and Vodani here, closing this pincer in on Avdiivka, as we can see happening there, as well as this will go back and forward across multiple days. But Russia is making small gains, small advances, day to day, week to week in there, similarly to what we saw in Bakhmut the same time last year, eventually with Bakhmut coming under control of the Russian forces. So we'll pick up from Bakhmut and we'll move up into the north and we'll have a look and see what changes we have seen through here. So some minor shift, I think, around Sperny, Vasily, but nothing too major here. Of course, Kremenar Forest, there's no real change in there. Now, Terni, we have had an update on this. Now, the deep state map hasn't changed. I've had a look at this previously, but we do have this video from Terni, which, if we actually have a geolocation, is right in here. So you can see where this shape of where some water has run, where of course then the tree lines are. So we're talking right in here. See, same spot. That there is a correction on the Surak map. So this correction has come from, this is of course a Russian drone. This is targeting Ukrainian areas with calling in the shelling. Now, this artillery shelling onto Ukrainian positions has said, well, actually, this is where the Ukrainian positions really are. So in this north of Donetsk, recent video footage positions here allows to correct the front line east of Terni, which shows some advances made by the Russian army in the previous days never took place. However, it was said previously the front line is stabilized after the arrival of Ukrainian reinforcements. And we can see just on where this funny bit of ground is, this is here. So correcting that bit here, and this is what we want, is we want geolocated footage to show us where things are changing instead of speculation from both sides of where is what. Now, there's been no major shift up in the northeast of the country, but we will come up right into northeast around Yahidny here, of course Sinkivka. There's no real change in this area. We've spoken about how important that this area is for both Ukraine and Russia, of course, with Kupiansk being a major hub for Ukraine and Russia, of course, wanting to get into that hub. Now, if we come down near Yahidny here, there's Olinka here, Perstravnevi in here. Now, there is one update we have from Suryak just here that shows this situation on the northeastern front. Ukraine army recaptured some positions south of Perstravnevi in here. So I've tried to line this up the best possibly that we can. Now, the best we can have a look at is where this road bends down. So it bends and then comes back up. So just north, just in here. But deep state map doesn't show any change, but Ukraine has made some ground in there. Now, legends. That is all that we have today. Sorry if this is going on a little bit longer than normal, but we had a fair bit to catch up on. I hope that you are well, and I'll be glad to be back to basically daily uploads, or at least most days. So I hope that you're doing well. If you'd like to support me, links down below. But thank you very much for your patience and your time. Cheers. Bye-bye.